The wrench slipped from my fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. Through the open window above my workbench, my wife's voice carried across the evening air like a slap to the face. Dean's just not a man. Jason? Jason's a real man. Our neighbor is more of a man than you'll ever be. I froze beneath the hood of Mrs. Patterson's Honda Civic, my hands still holding the oil filter. The words hit me harder than any blow I'd taken in Big Mike's boxing gym. Marla's voice was clear, deliberate, designed to wound. She was talking to her best friend Lisa in our kitchen, likely sipping wine and dissecting my life like vultures circling their prey. Sounds like a real man problem to me, Lisa's voice chimed in with that nasty laugh of hers. My 15-year-old daughter Mel's bedroom window slammed shut upstairs. Great, she heard it too. I straightened up slowly, wiping my hands on an old rag. Dean Callix, 43 years old, owner of Callix Auto Repair, apparently not man enough for his own wife. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was fixing cars while she was busy breaking our marriage. Jason Red, our neighbor for the past 2 years, the guy with the perfect lawn, the shiny black BMW, and the new construction company that was supposedly making him rich. The same Jason who'd been borrowing tools from me just last month, asking for advice about his transmission troubles. I walked to the window and peered across our small backyard. Jason's house sat there like a monument to everything I apparently wasn't. 2 stories of fresh paint and modern fixtures, complete with the hot tub he'd installed last spring. I could see him now through his kitchen window, gesturing wildly while talking on his phone, probably closing another deal. The front door of my house opened and Mel stormed out, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She didn't look at me as she headed down the driveway. "Where you going, kiddo?" I called out. "Anywhere but here," she shot back without stopping. "At least now I know who the real parent is." That stung worse than Marla's comment. Mel had always been Daddy's little girl, the one who helped me in the garage on weekends, who actually listened when I talked about carburetors and timing belts. Now even she was questioning what kind of man I was. I closed the garage door and headed inside. Marla and Lisa were still in the kitchen, their conversation shifting to weekend plans and some charity event at the country club. Neither acknowledged me as I grabbed a bottle of water from the refrigerator. "Oh, Dean," Marla said without looking up from her phone. "I'll be late tomorrow night. Client dinner." "Which client?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "The Morrison account. Lisa's handling the contracts." Lisa smiled, that plastic smile of hers. It's a big deal. Could set Marla up for partner track at the firm. Right, partner track. Ever since Marla started working at Henderson, Walsh & Associates 6 months ago, everything had been about advancing her career, networking with the right people, and apparently deciding her husband wasn't good enough for her new image. I headed upstairs to check on my son Sam. At 12, he was still young enough to lose himself in video games and avoid the tension that had been building in our house like pressure in a faulty radiator. "Hey buddy, how was school?" "Fine," he mumbled, not looking away from his screen. "Mom said we might be moving soon. To a bigger house." "Did she now?" "Yeah. She said you two need to talk about it." This was news to me. We hadn't talked about moving. We hadn't talked about much of anything lately except who was picking up groceries and whether I'd remembered to pay the electric bill. I went to our bedroom and found Marla's purse sitting on the dresser. Call it intuition or just plain suspicion, but something made me look inside. Beneath her wallet and makeup bag, I found receipts. Dinner at Romano's, the expensive Italian place downtown. Hotel charges from the Riverside Inn. A bar tab from Murphy's Pub with 2 signatures, Marla's and Jason's. The dates told the story. 3 weeks ago, when she said she was working late. Last Tuesday, when she claimed to be at a conference in the state capitol. The pattern was clear as engine oil on a white shirt. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the evidence in my hands. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, a business I'd built from nothing, and this was what it came to. My wife sneaking around with the neighbor while telling her friends I wasn't man enough. The front door slammed downstairs. Through our bedroom window, I watched Marla cross the yard to Jason's back gate. She didn't knock, just walked right in like she owned the place. I grabbed a jacket and slipped out through the garage. The alley behind our houses was dark, lined with garbage cans and overgrown bushes that provided perfect cover. From there, I had a clear view of Jason's backyard. They were in his hot tub, wine glasses balanced on the edge, Marla's laugh carrying across the night air. The same laugh she used to save for me when we were young and everything seemed possible. Jason's prized Mustang sat in his driveway, a cherry-red 1967 fastback he'd restored himself. He was always bragging about that car, showing it off at the local cruise nights, revving the engine whenever pretty women walked by. I pulled out my pocket knife and approached the car. The tires were expensive, Pirelli performance rubber that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. One by one, I punctured each tire, the hiss of escaping air like a whispered promise of things to come. On his windshield, I left a note written on a scrap of paper from my pocket. Real men don't need tubs. Walking back to my house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Satisfaction. It was a small victory, but it was mine. The next morning, I watched from my kitchen window as Jason discovered his flat tires. He stormed around the car, checking each wheel, his face growing redder by the minute. Then he looked up at something, a security camera mounted under his garage eave. My phone buzzed with a text from Marla. "We need to talk." The text message stared back at me like an accusation. 3 words that confirmed what I already knew. Jason's security camera had caught me in the act. I set my coffee cup down and typed back, "About what?" Marla's response came immediately. "Don't play games, Dean. I know what you did to Jason's car." So we were using first names now, not our neighbor or Mr. Red. Just Jason, like they were old friends, or something more. I spent the morning at the shop, trying to focus on work instead of the mess my life had become. Big Mike stopped by around noon, his massive frame filling the doorway of my office. Mike had been my boxing coach back in high school and remained one of the few people in town who still treated me with respect. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," he said, settling his bulk into the chair across from my desk. "Something like that. Word around town is your wife's been spending time with that developer fellow, the one with the fancy car." I looked up sharply. "Word around town?" "Dean, this is Millbrook. Population 8,000 on a good day. When the mayor's wife gets a new haircut, it makes the front page of the weekly paper. You think nobody noticed your missus sneaking around?" Great. So I was officially the town cuckold, the guy whose wife preferred the neighbor. I could already imagine the conversations at Rhonda's tavern, the sideways glances at the grocery store, the whispered comments at Sam's baseball games. "What are you going to do about it?" Mike asked. "What can I do? She's made her choice pretty clear." "You know what I always told you about fighting? You want to win, you got to fight on your terms, not theirs." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what fighting on my terms would look like in this situation. In the ring, the rules were simple. Hit harder than the other guy and don't go down. Marriage was more complicated. That afternoon brought the monthly block party on Elm Street. The whole neighborhood gathered in the small park at the end of our block, complete with grilled burgers, folding tables covered in potluck dishes, and kids running around with sticky fingers and grass-stained knees. Under normal circumstances, I enjoyed these gatherings. Today felt like walking into enemy territory. Marla arrived separately, wearing a new dress I'd never seen before. She positioned herself near Jason's table, laughing at his stories about construction projects and business deals. Lisa hovered nearby like a bodyguard, shooting disapproving looks in my direction whenever I got too close. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and found a spot near the grills where I could observe without drawing attention. That's when Jason made his move. "Dean!" he called out, approaching with a beer in one hand and that smug grin plastered across his face. "How's the auto repair business? Still getting your hands dirty for a living? Several neighbors turned to watch our interaction. Jason was performing for an audience, and I was apparently the opening act. Someone's got to fix what's broken, I replied evenly. True, though some things are beyond repair, don't you think? His eyes flicked toward Marla, then back to me. Sometimes you just have to upgrade. He took a step closer, and somehow his beer bottle tilted, spilling cold liquid down the front of my shirt. The accident was perfectly timed and completely deliberate. Oh, sorry about that, Jason said with mock concern. Guess I'm all thumbs today. The crowd had gone quiet, sensing the tension between us. Marla watched from across the park, her expression unreadable. This was my moment. I could either take the humiliation or fight back. I smiled and raised my own beer bottle in a toast. No worries, Jason. Thanks for showing my wife what a real man looks like. I just hope you have the stamina to keep up with her expectations. Laughter rippled through the crowd, but not the kind Jason had been hoping for. His face flushed red as people began to understand the subtext of our conversation. What's that supposed to mean? He demanded. Oh, I think you know exactly what it means. After all, you've been getting pretty familiar with my family lately. More laughter, this time directed at Jason. Marla's face had gone pale, and Lisa was tugging at her arm, trying to pull her away from the scene. You better watch your mouth, Jason said, stepping closer. Or what? You'll steal my wife? Too late for that threat, don't you think? The crowd was eating this up. Small-town drama was better than cable television, and I was giving them front-row seats to the collapse of my marriage. Jason's hands clenched into fists, but he was smart enough not to throw the first punch with half the neighborhood watching. Instead, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with beer dripping from my shirt and the taste of victory in my mouth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mike's advice, fight on your terms. What were my terms? I was a mechanic, good with my hands, better with tools than with words. I understood how things worked, how to take them apart and put them back together. Maybe it was time to start taking things apart. I slipped out of the house around 2 a.m. and made my way to Jason's backyard. His pool glowed blue in the darkness, the expensive filtration system humming quietly. It took me 20 minutes to locate the main drain valve and another 10 to figure out how to open it without making noise. By morning, 20,000 gallons of chlorinated water would be flowing down the storm drains, leaving Jason with an empty concrete hole and a hefty refill bill. On my way back to the house, I noticed Marla's car wasn't in the driveway. At 2:30 in the morning, there was only one place she could be. I settled into my kitchen chair and waited for dawn, planning my next move. The burner phone was hidden in Marla's jewelry box, tucked beneath a tangle of earrings she never wore. I found it while she was showering, preparing for another client dinner that would probably end at Jason's house. The text messages told a story that made my stomach clench with rage. Not just the affair. I'd already accepted that reality. This was worse. This was conspiracy. Lisa to Marla. Dean's account info is in the safe deposit box. Once we transfer everything, you can file the restraining order. Marla to Lisa. What about the kids? Lisa to Marla. Temporary custody is automatic with domestic violence claims. Jason's friend at the courthouse will expedite the paperwork. Domestic violence. They were planning to frame me for abuse to steal my kids and empty our joint accounts. I photographed every message, my hands shaking with fury. The next text thread was even more revealing. Jason to Marla. Lisa's got everything arranged. 2 more weeks and you'll be free. Marla to Jason. What about Dean's business? Jason to Marla. Property lien for unpaid contractor fees. I'll buy the building at auction. They weren't just stealing my wife and kids. They were planning to destroy my entire life and profit from the wreckage. I sat on my bed, staring at the evidence on my phone screen. 3 people I'd trusted were conspiring to frame me for crimes I'd never committed, take my children, steal my money, and destroy the business I'd spent 20 years building. Mike was right. Time to fight on my terms. First, I moved my money. Every account with my name on it, checking, savings, the business accounts, got transferred to a new bank across town. I changed all the passwords, updated the contact information, and made sure Marla's access was completely severed. Then I called a lawyer. Not one of Marla's colleagues from Henderson, Walsh & Associates, but a scrappy divorce attorney named Patricia Morse, who had a reputation for protecting men in messy custody battles. "Mr. Callix," she said after reviewing the screenshots I'd sent her, "this is attempted fraud, conspiracy, and perjury. We need to document everything." "What about my kids?" "With this evidence, they won't be able to touch your parental rights. In fact, we might be looking at criminal charges against your wife and her accomplices." That afternoon, I changed the locks on our house. When Marla came home from work, her key wouldn't turn in the front door. She pounded on the wood with her fists. "Dean, open this door right now!" I opened it slowly, keeping the chain latch engaged so she could only see my face through the crack. "Problem?" I asked. "What did you do to the locks?" "Improved home security. You never know who might try to break in and steal your stuff." Her eyes narrowed. "This is my house too." "Actually, it's not. The deed is in my name only, remember? We never got around to adding you after the refinancing." "You can't lock me out of my own home." "I'm not locking you out. I'm just being careful about who I let in. Can't trust everyone these days." Through the crack in the door, I could see Jason approaching from across the street. He'd probably been watching from his window, waiting to play the hero. "Is there a problem here?" Jason called out. "No problem," I replied loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "Just explaining to my wife that her boyfriend's house might be more comfortable anyway." Marla's face flushed crimson. "Dean, stop this. We need to talk." "We do need to talk. About your plans to frame me for domestic violence. About the money you were planning to steal. About how you and Lisa and Jason thought you could destroy my life." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." I held up the burner phone. "This says otherwise." Jason had reached our front porch, his chest puffed out like a rooster ready for a fight. "You need to let your wife into her own house. And you need to mind your own business. Unless you want me to start sharing some interesting text messages with the neighborhood." That stopped him cold. He knew exactly what messages I was referring to. "Come on, Marla," he said, taking her arm. "You can stay at my place until we sort this out." "How convenient," I said. "The boyfriend offers shelter. What a real man thing to do." I closed the door and turned the deadbolt, leaving them standing on my porch. Through the window, I watched them walk across the street to Jason's house, Marla's shoulders shaking with what might have been tears or rage. My phone buzzed with a call from Lisa. "Dean, we need to discuss this situation rationally." "Rational? Like planning to frame me for domestic violence? That kind of rational?" Silence on the other end. "Here's what's going to happen, Lisa. You're going to stay away from my family. You're going to cancel whatever plans you made with your courthouse friend. And you're going to pray I don't decide to share those text messages with the State Bar Association. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting any of you. Don't call me again." I hung up and looked around my house, for the first time in months. It felt bigger somehow, like I could finally breathe again. From upstairs came the sound of Mel's bedroom door opening. "Dad," she called down, "is Mom really gone?" "For now." "Good. I heard what she said about you. It wasn't true." My throat tightened with emotion. "Thanks, kiddo." "Dad, are you going to be okay?" I thought about the evidence on the burner phone, the money safely moved to new accounts, the lawyer already preparing our defense. "Yeah, Mel. I think I'm going to be just fine." The recording device was smaller than a matchbox, with a magnetic backing that stuck perfectly to the underside of Lisa's car bumper. I'd bought it from a private investigator's supply catalog, the kind of equipment that was perfectly legal as long as you knew how to use it properly. Lisa had been the architect of this whole scheme, but I needed proof. The text messages showed conspiracy, but I needed her voice, her words, her confession that she was the puppet master pulling everyone's strings. It took 3 days of surveillance to find my opportunity. Lisa met with someone at Romano's restaurant, the same place where Marla and Jason had been having their secret dinners. Through the window, I could see her companion, a thin man in an expensive suit who kept checking his watch and taking notes. The recording device picked up their conversation perfectly. "The restraining order gets filed tomorrow morning," the man said. "Judge Morrison owes me favors, so it'll be approved immediately." "And the asset seizure?" "Automatic with domestic violence allegations. We'll have the accounts frozen within hours." Lisa's voice was cold, calculating. "What about the business?" "Jason's contractor lion is already filed. Once Callix defaults on the property taxes, which he will since his accounts are frozen, the building goes to auction. Jason will be the only bidder." "Perfect. And the custody arrangement?" "Temporary full custody to the mother, supervised visitation for the father, standard procedure in abuse cases." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. They had corrupted a judge, fabricated legal documents, and planned to steal everything I'd worked for based on lies. But Lisa wasn't finished. "You know this is personal for me," she said. "Dean Callix ruined my life 5 years ago." 5 years ago. I searched my memory, trying to place when I might have encountered Lisa before Marla started working at the law firm. Then it hit me. Lisa Van, formerly Lisa Hendricks. She'd worked for my accountant's office, handling the books for several small businesses, including mine. "He caught you embezzling," the man said. "Cost you your CPA license. Cost me everything, my career, my reputation, my marriage. When I saw Marla posting about her new job, about her mechanic husband, I knew it was time for payback." The pieces fell into place like gears in a transmission. Lisa had orchestrated Marla's affair with Jason, manipulated my wife into believing I wasn't good enough, and planned this elaborate scheme to destroy my life as revenge for exposing her embezzlement years ago. "Marla doesn't know the real reason you befriended her, does she?" the man asked. "Marla's an idiot. She actually believes this is about finding true love with Jason. She has no idea she's just a weapon I'm using to destroy her husband." I had everything I needed. That evening I invited Mike over for dinner. Mel cooked spaghetti while Sam set the table, both kids happy to have some normalcy back in the house. Mike listened quietly as I played the recording, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "That's some serious criminal conspiracy," he said. "You could send all 3 of them to prison." "Prison's too easy," I replied. "I want them to face the consequences in front of everyone they've been lying to." "What did you have in mind?" I smiled. "Ever heard of a lakeside intervention?" The next day was Saturday, perfect for my plan. I sent identical text messages to Marla, Jason, and Lisa. "Emergency meeting. Kids found out everything. Need to discuss damage control. Lakeside cabin, 2 p.m., come alone." The cabin belonged to my uncle, a rustic retreat on Miller's Lake about 20 minutes outside town. Isolated, private, and equipped with excellent cell phone reception. Perfect for what I had planned. I arrived early and set up my equipment. A laptop connected to my phone's hotspot, a small video camera, and speakers powerful enough to broadcast across the lake. Then I created a Facebook Live event and invited everyone I could think of. Neighbors, customers, Marla's co-workers, Jason's business associates, the kids' teachers, half the town of Millbrook. The title read, "Truth and Consequences, A Real Man's Response." Marla arrived first, looking nervous and checking her phone constantly. Jason pulled up 10 minutes later in a rental car. His Mustang was still in the shop getting new tires. Lisa came last, her expression suspicious as she noticed the other cars in the parking area. "What's this about?" Lisa demanded as they gathered on the cabin's front porch. "Come inside and find out," I said, holding the door open. The cabin's main room was rustic but comfortable, with a stone fireplace and windows overlooking the lake. I'd arranged 4 chairs in a semicircle facing the camera, which I'd positioned to capture everyone in the frame. "Sit down," I said. "All of you." "Dean, what's going on?" Marla asked. "Where are the kids?" "The kids are safe at Mike's house. They don't need to see this." I pressed the button to start the Facebook live stream. Within seconds, viewers began joining. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds, as people shared the link. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the camera, "welcome to the truth. For the past 6 months, these 3 people have been conspiring to destroy my life, steal my money, take my children, and frame me for crimes I never committed. Tonight, you're going to hear them confess." Jason started to stand up. "This is insane. I'm leaving." "Sit down, Jason, or I'll share the recording of Lisa discussing your contractor fraud with Judge Morrison." He sat down hard, his face pale. "That's right," I continued, looking at the camera. "Our local developer has been bribing judges and filing false liens, but that's just the beginning." I played the first recording, Lisa's conversation with the corrupt lawyer. The viewer count climbed past 500 as people heard the details of the conspiracy. Marla was crying now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. "Dean, please stop this." "Stop what? Telling the truth? Isn't that what real men do?" I played the second recording, Lisa admitting that she'd manipulated Marla as revenge for the embezzlement case. Marla's head snapped up, staring at her best friend with shock and betrayal. "You used me?" Marla whispered. Lisa's mask finally slipped. "You were convenient, pretty, naive, and married to the man who destroyed my life." "I didn't destroy your life," I said. "I caught you stealing from your clients. You destroyed your own life." The viewer count had passed 800. Comments were flooding in, neighbors expressing shock, customers offering support, Marla's co-workers distancing themselves from the scandal. Jason made another attempt to leave, but I blocked his path. "We're not finished yet," I said. "Tell everyone about the money you stole from your investors. Tell them about the houses you never finished building. Tell them about the liens you filed against properties you never worked on." "I don't have to listen to this," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're right. You don't have to listen, but everyone else does." I pulled out a folder thick with documents, financial records, building permits, investor complaints. Jason Red isn't a successful developer. He's a con artist who's been running a Ponzi scheme for the past 2 years. The fancy car, the expensive house, the hot tub, all bought with other people's money. The comments section exploded as viewers recognized names and addresses from the documents. People who'd invested in Jason's projects, homeowners who'd been waiting months for promised work, contractors who hadn't been paid. "This is slander," Lisa said, but her voice was shaking. "Slander is spoken lies," I replied. "This is libel, and it's only illegal if it's false. Everything I'm saying is documented fact." I turned to face the camera directly. My wife told her friends I wasn't man enough for her, that our neighbor was more of a man than I'd ever be. Maybe she was right. Maybe real men don't expose fraud and conspiracy. Maybe real men don't protect their children from criminals. Maybe real men just take whatever punishment these people want to dish out. The viewer count had reached over 1,000. Local news stations were probably monitoring the feed by now. "But I'm not that kind of man," I continued. "I'm the kind of man who fights back when people try to destroy his family. I'm the kind of man who exposes the truth, no matter how ugly it gets." I gestured toward Marla, Jason, and Lisa. These people thought they could ruin my life and walk away clean. They thought I'd be too weak, too stupid, or too broken to fight back. They were wrong. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Someone had probably called in a disturbance, or maybe the authorities were responding to the fraud allegations being broadcast live to half the county. "The police are coming." I announced to the camera, but not for me. I haven't broken any laws. I haven't committed fraud, bribery, conspiracy, or embezzlement. I haven't tried to frame anyone for crimes they didn't commit. I looked at each of my 3 captives in turn. Can any of you say the same? The sirens were very close now. Through the cabin windows, I could see flashing lights reflecting off the lake. "This concludes tonight's broadcast," I said to the camera. "Thank you for witnessing the truth. Remember, sometimes the real man is the one who refuses to be the victim." I ended the live stream as police cars pulled into the parking area. The viewer count had peaked at over 1,500 people, and the video would be saved automatically to my Facebook page for anyone who missed the live broadcast. The cabin door opened, and 3 officers entered, led by Sheriff Martinez, whom I'd known since high school. "Dean," he said with a tired sigh. "What the heck is going on here?" I handed him a flash drive containing all the evidence I'd gathered. Fraud, conspiracy, bribery, and attempted extortion. Everything you need is on there. He looked at Marla, Jason, and Lisa, then back at me. "Anyone hurt?" "Only their reputations." The town square had never seen anything like it. What started as the annual Millbrook Founders' Day festival had transformed into something between a public trial and a medieval pillory. Word of the lakeside confession had spread through social media faster than gossip at a church bake sale, and it seemed like half the county had shown up to witness the aftermath. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching as vendors sold funnel cakes and cotton candy, while people clustered around picnic tables, smartphones in hand, replaying clips from the Facebook Live broadcast. The video had been shared over 3,000 times in the past week, making it the most viral content in Millbrook's history. Marla sat alone on a bench near the bandstand, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Her law firm had placed her on administrative leave pending an investigation into her association with Lisa's schemes. The divorce papers I'd filed cited adultery and conspiracy, seeking full custody of the kids and complete dissolution of our marital assets. Jason was nowhere to be seen. His construction company had collapsed overnight as investors demanded their money back, and the state attorney general opened a formal investigation. The house across from mine now sat empty, a "for sale by bank" sign planted in the yard where his perfect lawn used to be. Lisa had fled town entirely. The State Bar Association had opened disciplinary proceedings, and criminal charges were pending. Her lawyer, the same corrupt attorney from the recording, had also disappeared, leaving behind a trail of angry clients and unpaid debts. "Dad!" Mel's voice cut through the crowd noise. She jogged over from the game booths, Sam trailing behind her with a stuffed animal prize tucked under his arm. "Having fun?" I asked. "The best," Mel said. "Everyone keeps telling us how proud they are of you for standing up to those people." "Mrs. Patterson said you're a hero," Sam added. "She said real men protect their families." I smiled at that. Mrs. Patterson, whose Honda I'd been fixing the night this all started, had become one of my most vocal supporters. She'd been telling everyone at the senior center about how I'd exposed the conspiracy and saved the town from Jason's fraudulent schemes. "Mr. Callix?" A young woman with a press badge approached our group. "Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. Could I ask you a few questions about recent events?" "I've said everything I need to say. The district attorney is considering filing charges against your wife and her associates. How does that make you feel?" I looked across the square at Marla, still sitting alone on her bench. Despite everything she'd done, seeing her isolated and defeated didn't bring me the satisfaction I'd expected. "Justice isn't about feelings," I said finally. "It's about consequences." The reporter scribbled notes. "What's next for you and your family?" "We're moving forward. That's what you do when the past tries to drag you down." As the afternoon wore on, a steady stream of people approached to offer support, share their own stories about Jason's business dealings, or simply express amazement at how the situation had unfolded. I'd become a local celebrity, the small-town mechanic who'd taken on the corrupt establishment and won. Around 4 o'clock, Mike found me near the beer tent, nursing a cold bottle and watching the crowd. "You know," he said, settling his bulk onto the picnic table bench beside me, "I've been thinking about what you said that night at the cabin." "What part?" "About being the kind of man who fights back. About refusing to be the victim." He took a long pull from his own beer. "You realize you've changed, right? This whole thing changed you." I considered that. 6 months ago, I'd been the guy who fixed cars and coached Little League, who grilled burgers at block parties and helped neighbors with their home repair projects. I'd been comfortable, predictable, maybe even a little boring. Changed how? You're harder now, colder. Not saying it's bad. You had to be, to survive what they put you through. But you're not the same Dean Callix who used to worry about hurting people's feelings. He was right. The old Dean would have confronted Marla privately, would have tried to work things out through counseling or mediation. He would have been devastated by the betrayal, but wouldn't have fought back with such calculated precision. Maybe that Dean was weak, I said, or maybe he was just trusting. There's a difference. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the bandstand. Marla had stood up and was walking toward the microphone that had been set up for the afternoon's speeches and presentations. People stopped their conversations and turned to watch. "May I have everyone's attention?" she said, her voice amplified across the square. The crowd fell silent. This was unexpected. Marla addressing the same community that had witnessed her public humiliation just days before. "My name is Marla Callix," she began, though everyone already knew who she was. "I want to apologize to this community for my actions over the past several months." I stood up, surprised by this development. Marla had always been proud, sometimes to a fault. Public apologies weren't her style. "I was manipulated and deceived by people I trusted," she continued, "but that doesn't excuse my choices. I betrayed my husband, my children, and my own values. I participated in schemes that could have destroyed innocent people's lives." The crowd listened in rapt attention. Some faces showed sympathy, others remained skeptical. "Dean Callix is a good man," Marla said, her voice beginning to crack. "He's the kind of man who builds things instead of tearing them down, who protects his family instead of destroying it, who tells the truth instead of living lies." She looked directly at me across the crowd. "I called him weak, but he was the strongest person in our marriage. I said our neighbor was more of a man, but there's no comparison. Dean is twice the person I am, and I threw it away for nothing." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you all to know that everything my husband exposed about me was true, and everything he did was justified." She stepped away from the microphone and walked quickly toward the parking area, leaving the crowd in stunned silence. I found myself following her, though I wasn't sure why. She was unlocking her car when I caught up. "Marla." She turned, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I meant what I said up there. I know. I destroyed us, didn't I? There's no coming back from this." I thought about the question seriously. Could we rebuild after such complete betrayal? Could I ever trust her again? Could our kids grow up in a household where their parents had tried to destroy each other? "No," I said finally. "There's no coming back." She nodded, accepting the verdict. The kids will be fine. We'll work out custody arrangements that put them first." "And the house?" "You can take whatever you need. I'm thinking about selling it anyway. Too many bad memories." She got into her car, then rolled down the window. "For what it's worth, Dean, you were always man enough. I was just too stupid to see it." I watched her drive away, knowing it was probably the last real conversation we'd ever have. The marriage was over, had been over since the night I heard her insult me through the kitchen window. But somehow, this felt like closure. Walking back toward the festival, I passed groups of people discussing Marla's speech, the ongoing investigations, and what it all meant for the community. Some praised my actions, others questioned whether I'd gone too far. Everyone had an opinion about the mechanic who'd brought down the corrupt developer and exposed the conspiracy. I didn't care what they thought. I'd fought on my own terms and won. The people who'd tried to destroy my life were facing consequences for their actions. My kids were safe, my business was thriving, and my reputation was intact. Near the bandstand, I spotted a familiar figure, Patricia Morse, the lawyer who'd helped me navigate the legal complexities of the case. "Dean," she called out. "Perfect timing. I just got off the phone with the district attorney's office." Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. They're offering Marla a plea deal, cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Jason and Lisa won't be so fortunate. What kind of cooperation? Testimony about the conspiracy, financial records, communication logs, everything needed to build airtight cases against the others. I nodded. It made sense. Marla had been a victim of Lisa's manipulation, even if she'd made her own choices along the way. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "The state attorney general wants to interview you about Jason's business practices. Apparently, your evidence uncovered a much larger fraud scheme than anyone realized." "How much larger?" "Try $2 million and counting. Investors from 3 counties, dozens of unfinished projects, a whole network of corrupt officials. You didn't just expose a local conspiracy, you uncovered a major criminal enterprise." The scope of it was staggering. I'd thought I was just dealing with a cheating wife and her boyfriend. Instead, I'd stumbled into something that could bring down judges, lawyers, and politicians across the region. "They want to offer you a commendation," Patricia said. "Maybe even a reward from the Investor Protection Fund." "I don't want a reward. I just wanted my life back." "Well, you've got that, and you've probably saved a lot of other people from losing theirs." As the sun began to set over Millbrook, the festival crowd started to thin out. Families packed up their blankets and headed home. Teenagers lingered around the game booths, and vendors began breaking down their stands. I collected Mel and Sam, who'd spent the day enjoying their newfound celebrity status as the children of the town hero. We walked home together, past the empty house where Jason used to live, past the neighbors who waved and called out supportive comments. "Dad?" Sam asked as we reached our front porch. "Are we going to be okay?" "Yeah, buddy. We're going to be better than okay." "What about Mom?" "Mom made some bad choices, but she's still your mother. We'll figure out how to make that work." Inside the house, I looked around at the space that had been a battlefield just weeks before. Now it felt peaceful, like a place where healing could begin. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Saw the news coverage. Proud of you for fighting back. Real men don't let people walk all over them. Uncle Ray." Uncle Ray, my father's brother, whom I hadn't heard from in years. Apparently word of the Millbrook scandal had spread beyond the local area. More messages followed throughout the evening. Old friends, distant relatives, former customers, even strangers who'd seen the news coverage. All expressing support, admiration, or simple amazement at how the situation had unfolded. But the message that mattered most came from Mel, texted from upstairs. "Thanks for being the kind of dad who fights for his family. Love you." I set my phone aside and walked out to the garage, where Mrs. Patterson's Honda still sat with its hood open, exactly where I'd left it the night this all began. I picked up my wrench and got back to work, fixing what was broken, making things run the way they were supposed to. 2 months later, Marla knocked on my new penthouse door. I'd sold the house on Elm Street and used the proceeds, along with a substantial settlement from Jason's insurance company, to buy a luxury apartment downtown. The kids had their own rooms, the view was spectacular, and there were no neighbors to complicate my life. "He emptied my bank account and disappeared," she said when I opened the door. Jason, apparently, had managed to access some hidden funds before fleeing the state. He'd convinced Marla to loan him money for legal fees, then vanished with everything she had left. Sounds like a real man problem, I replied, and closed the door on the view and kept the quiet.